Welcome, everybody, to our June 2nd regular meeting. I would like to invite Supervisor De La Cruz to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ready, sir? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to acknowledge certificate of posting?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we're going to continue with presentations and recognitions, and I would like to make a motion that we approve both proclamations that are before us today.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I will invite Supervisor Botello to present the Rotary Club proclamation honoring the Rotary Club.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If there's anybody from the Rotary here today, thank you. Congratulations on 90 years of being in existence here in Hollister. That's fantastic. Rotary is one of our finest service clubs in our community, benefiting not only locally, but statewide and internationally, which is, one of the better organizations, I think, that is in existence today for people to be involved with in service to their community. And we have a Rotary in San Juan as well. But it doesn't have the history that you have, 90 years in existence, and it's a privilege of to represent the Board of Supervisors in San Bernardino County in presenting this proclamation of 90 years of the Hollister Rotary Club. And I'll read over a few of the whereases, probably not the whole thing, but it's because you have quite a few of them. Whereas in June 6, 1925, 125 Rotarians from Central Coast gathered for the first official meeting of the Hollister Club, including a formal presentation of the club's charter by the Salinas Rotary Club. And whereas over 1.2 million Rotary members worldwide comprise professional business leaders in 200 countries and geographically areas where Rotary works to impact many lives at both the local and international levels. Whereas the Rotary Club of Hollister supports our youth through scholarships to San Bernardino County high school students, through the Interact Club by hosting annual speech contests, and through international youth exchange. Whereas the Rotary Club of Hollister is celebrating 90 years of leadership, service, and fellowship. Now, therefore, it be proclaimed that the San Bernardino County Board of Supervisors congratulate the Rotary Club of Hollister on the occasion of its 90th anniversary and wish them continued success in its various programs to enhance our community. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you said, please say a few words.
All right. Well, Supervisors Bortello and Madam Chair and the rest of the supervisors, thank you so much for this proclamation and this recognition. Hollister Rotarians have been in service to the community of Hollister for the past 90 years, for our youth through scholarships and leadership opportunities, for our nonprofits through grants and through volunteerism, and for our community through special events and activities. And also, as we mentioned internationally, we help families throughout the world with shelter, with food, and with education. So on behalf of my fellow Hollister Rotarians, thank you so much for today's proclamation.
Can I just add something? We're this close to ending polio worldwide, so we're very proud of that too. We've been involved in that for quite a few years. And we're having a celebration next Monday night. If any of you would like to join the celebration, we'd love to have you come. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Supervisor Munzer, if you could present the proclamation for National Alzheimer's, June as National Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month.
Is there anybody there?
So the Board of Supervisors has the honor of proclaiming June as the National Alzheimer and Brain Awareness Month. Whereas today there are more than 5 million Americans living with Alzheimer's, a figure that is expected to grow to as many as 16 million by mid-century if we don't develop a cure and effective treatments. Whereas the Alzheimer Association is making June as Alzheimer and Brain Awareness Month and June 21st as the longest day, and asking the residents of San Benito County to visit actionalz.org to learn more about the Alzheimer's and become part of the effort to combat this disease. And now therefore be it resolved that San Benito County Board of Supervisors do hereby proclaim June Alzheimer and Brain Awareness Month and June 21st, 2015 as the longest day in San Benito County.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you for this great proclamation and the honoring all of the people and the caregivers of families with Alzheimer's and the people afflicted by this hideous disease. We're working hard every day to, as the Rotarians do, to eliminate polio. We hope to eliminate Alzheimer's one day. And June 21st, we ask everybody who can and has purple in their closet to wear purple, recognizing the caregivers for those that have the longest day every day for caring for those with Alzheimer's. Thank you so much for this honor.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to public comment. If there's anybody in the public that would like to address the board on items that are not on the agenda, you may do so at this time. Clerk of the board, do we have any?
Yes, Madam Chair. Marvin Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, board members. They're handing out a California Essential Habitat Connectivity Project that the state established, 4 or 5 years ago. It's California's version of the big poster with the red and yellow one that I showed you last year from the biodiversity, where 50% of the United States is supposed to be off limits to humans, and about 35 or 40% of the remainder has limited use for humans. Well, this is California's version from 5 years ago. Look at all the green that can't do anything with. There's still some areas, look like about half of San Benito County and most of Monterey County, we can still live there. But notice all the little lines between the big splotches of green. They're those habitat connectivity projects. What was it, 2 weeks ago in the newspaper, there was a big deal about, where was it? I'm not sure, the Provo watershed has been designated as a habitat connectivity. So that's now off limits. So we've got one of these green lines being implemented here in our county. Agenda 21's coming. It's getting here slowly. Been what, 24 or 5 years since that Rio de Janeiro conference, and it's getting here even to San Benito County. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any other speaker cards for?
Yes, Mr. Marty Richmond.
Okay.
Good morning, Marty Richmond from Hollister. I am interested in solving the Nash Road issue for the high school. I don't support just closing the road and doing nothing else. I don't think that's a viable way to do it. I've put forth to several of you and people in the city and people on the Board of Trustees what I think is a comprehensive three-way program, because I think all three of those organizations have to work together. And it would include the city eventually closing the road on some firm schedule, declaring the area around there that's impacted as a special vehicle safety zone, enforcing the laws there, asking the high school to make sure they enforce the non-moving violation things, to go out and make sure their students and their faculty do not park in the places they've been asked not to park in, and have the high school enforce that among, for parking privileges among their own people, which they can do. And also, I've asked that they contact the county and get an agreement in writing that the county would build the bypass at some, agreeable date. Oh, he's just programming it, excuse me. I thought my time was up already. And then, finally, the key to the whole thing is to get it in writing, is to get a memorandum of understanding, an MOU between the three parties involved, so we can get it solved. I'm not interested in just saying no, that I oppose things. I'm interested in solving the problem. But to do so, everybody's going to have to step up to the plate and do their part. If any of the part falls through, we can't solve the problem. Mere promises of we'll eventually build it, or we'll eventually close it, or we'll eventually clean it up, or we'll eventually, or this week we'll enforce the parking regulations, but as soon as we get the Nash Road closed, then the school stops enforcing going out and make sure the guys are not throwing pizza boxes on the lawn. So that's the way I see it. I hope the three entities will agree to do it, and there's no reason we can't do it, provided everybody does their part. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Any other speaker cards?
Yes, Mitch Matthews.
Thank you. And this sort of overlaps with what we were just speaking about, the Alzheimer's Association. We had intended on being part of the regular agenda items, and we still hope to in the future quarterly to report as a commission. The Long-Term Care Commission is appointed through the San Bernardino County Board of Supervisors on what items are relevant to the senior community in San Bernardino County, and why this is important to the work that all of you are doing, and then as a county, what we can do collectively. So we want to extend ourselves as a resource to you as experts in this field, and bring to you on a quarterly basis some of the issues that we're working on. So we wanted to highlight today, just very briefly, why this is relevant and important to all of us now here in a report developed through the Seniors Council, which has affiliated with the Area Agency on Aging, the Foster Grandparents, Project Scout Companions for Life, and others here through the senior community, representing in the Long-Term Care Commission here. People from the Palliative Care, Sunny Underwood, Patsy Pence here from Ombudsman, Clay Kemp here from the Senior Council here. We have very strong advocates for making sure that we're taking good care of our seniors in our community. Just a couple of brief items here of what's happening around the country and San Bernardino County. Throughout the United States, seniors over 60 represent the fastest growing age group in the country. In California, over 1,000 Californians are turning 65 every day, and will continue to do so for the next 15 years. Statewide, the population of all ages is projected to grow by 4.7%. However, the ages of 85 or older are growing twice that fast, and the 65 to 74 range is growing even faster at 26%. It's remarkable. In San Bernardino County in particular, the 60-plus population has increased by 9% since 2011. 1,300 of the county's 9,800 seniors are eligible for Medi-Cal. The over 60 Medi-Cal eligible group population grew 25% just in 2011. 8% of the population, and this is something that we really need to highlight on as more of a country and San Bernardino County, 8% of the population consumes 75% of the health care costs, with the vast majority of those being seniors with chronic conditions. 4 seniors per week turn 60 in San Bernardino County, and 47% of all older San Bernardino County residents aged 65 plus do not have enough income to meet their basic needs. So these are some of the reasons why we think that this is very important for our commission to be addressing these issues one at a time with the capacity of experts that we have working on it, and bring it to your attention on a quarterly basis, so you can expect to hear more from us. And I think our next coming project we're going to be looking at is how we're incorporating the managed Medi-Cal program that's going to be coming to San Bernardino County, how that's going to be affecting the seniors, how that will affect the healthcare delivery system, and what's going to be missing. For example, there's no psychiatric ability for Medi-Cal to be helping people with psychiatric issues in the senior community or Medi-Cal. So we'll be bringing this more as it comes here, and thank you for all the great efforts you have on behalf of the seniors. Thank you.
And thank you for your presentation. You bring us some really important information that I believe is going to serve this community well. because the numbers are growing, and we have to address not only the medical issues, but the housing, recreation, and a lot of other services that are necessary for the aging population. So we appreciate it, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you
regularly.
so much for your observation and perception of that, 'cause indeed that's the case. Appreciate it.
Clay Kemp.
I do a handout for the board. Good morning, everyone. Clay Kemp, Executive Director of the Seniors Council. And the last time I was here, I shared that we would be working on a senior needs assessment in the coming year. And I'm really happy and excited to announce that today is really the kickoff day for San Benito County, so I thought we're better to make that announcement than at the Board of Supervisors. So you have in your hands a cover letter and really a one-page, double-sided survey that we're trying to get in the hands of as many people over the age of 60 as possible. If you know any groups or even individuals that would be interested or could potentially benefit from letting us know the status of our San Benito County seniors, we have additional copies that are available. And I also want to highlight that there's an online version available, and that's at the Seniors Council webpage, which is www.seniorscouncil.org. It's featured right on our homepage, so it's pretty easy to just click on there and find out about it. We'll have the survey open for several months, and then we'll start doing some data crunching and analysis of it. After all that's done, which probably won't be till sometimes this winter, we'll issue a final report, and one of the things we hope to do is come before our various cities and counties and present the findings of that, so you can find out and hear firsthand what our own seniors are telling us work well or don't work so well. And I think one of the things that I want to just add on this survey is there is a place beyond the survey where you can make just your personal comments about what each individual senior is experiencing, and sometimes those comments are the most enlightening part of the entire survey. We really hear some moving stories on it. So that's it, and again, if you can spread the word, we would greatly appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. And when that survey is complete, we welcome you to, call us so we can set you up either on an agenda item. It's important info.
Thanks. That would be wonderful.
Okay,
Love to do that.
thank you.
And Mr. Reed Sanders.
Good morning, Madam Chair,
Morning.
Board of Supervisors. Sorry to repeat myself again, but I just wanted to announce myself again. Reed Sanders, San Benito County resident. I'm here currently on behalf of the State Senate as Senator Anthony Canelo's representative in the 12th District. My office is in Salinas. I'm this Hollister resident, so I'm always around locally if you need me. But if you're looking for any assistance with state issues or senior concerns, I'd love to speak to you folks in a bit. I can be reached at 831-769-8040, and that office is in Salinas, California, on 369 Main Street, Suite 208. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Reed. Okay, anybody else from the public that would like to address the board on items not on the agenda? Okay, we'll bring it back then for department head announcements. CAO Espinosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. Yes, there are a few announcements that we have. One of the announcements is actually coming out of our Health and Human Services Department. Item number 9 on our consent agenda actually has been edited. It's a slight edit. I just wanted to let the board know. It's with regards to dates. The date in the packet was July 1st, 2015, and it should have read June 19th. I just wanted to make sure the board is aware of that.
So we'll be pulling that item, CAO?
We were just going to announce that with that
Okay.
with that clause. If the board wishes to pull it, that may be fine, but we'd rather
But
not
it's
pull
just
it.
a date change then.
Just a date
Okay.
change, that's it. We also have another one out of administration. We have Sarah Fontanos. This is to update the board with regards to our regional park. Sarah?
Good morning, everyone. Just wanted to let you know, I was actually able to attend the joint city council and school board meeting, I believe it was last week now. I was able to comment and ask that they respectfully remain open and patient for information. As you know, we've been working on, county staff and legal has been working on the administrative draft of our EIR. And as required by CEQA, there is a transportation section as part of that EIR. I did let them know about that. There was also a lot of talk about, who's going first in this exchange and working together. And not that I need to remind all of you, but I want to say that as part of January, what you approved in the resolution, that was the purpose of that written resolution, was trying to get agreements in writing to move forward together. So I'm not sure how that message was lost, but staff will be working actively with other staff to push that forward and to keep conversations open, hopefully.
We have a question from Supervisor Rivas.
Yeah, so I actually, it's funny, Marty gets up and talks about it, staff, I'm like bottled up here because I have all these comments about this issue, and I'm about to explode. And so, I just want to comment and say that certainly I'm aware of the town hall, and apparently it was a bash-all session on our board, which is great, but at the same time, the message of loss is a great comment, because this is extremely frustrating for me, because clearly there's a disconnect between our board and the city. I mean, this has been an ongoing issue since 2012, when Trustee Rodriguez came to our board and asked us to provide a solution to the problem. So we met several times in closed session, out here in the public, about, providing an approach to solve the problem. I think the eventual goal of this problem was closure. But there was some disagreement among our board about what we wanted to do. And so we worked out our differences, and we decided to take this incremental approach. And it was my understanding that our staff was working with the City of Hollister staff, was working with the staff from the school district. And so if we all recall, we worked together to put up those temporary stop signs. With the eventual goal in mind was eventual closure, And so what's really frustrating for me is, things were said. Councilmember Gomez said that he didn't trust the county to build a bypass road anytime soon. He may be right. I thought that was all discussed and worked out between our professional staffs. He said that nobody's giving him a solution. Well, what the heck have we been working towards for the last 2 or 3 years? And it's incredibly frustrating. There's this, an obvious a disconnect between us and the city. And so that's why I'm proposing, I would like to see this issue come before us again, because when we passed this resolution, it took us less than 5 minutes to vote on this because of all the work that had been done. And then all of a sudden, we're the board that's being criticized for acting irrationally, I guess, or being unprepared. So I would like to invite the city manager to our meeting so he can tell us exactly what his issue is with, if he can, bring, I guess, a message from the council on how we can speed this process up and resolve it. I mean, I would hate to think that, 2 or 3 years of work that we've done has gone by the wayside. I'm not sure if there's been, the message was lost from the city's point of view. It sounds like that's been the case. But we just need some answers. And it's for us, we've heard that is this about the land that we're going to get? I mean, for us, for me, this is about public safety. And so do we have to wait until a student gets hit by a car until we actually all have to be here and we pass emergency resolutions? I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, this issue needs to be addressed. And so if we could. Madam Chair, if we can get this on the agenda at our next meeting, invite the city manager to come and hopefully explain to us how we can resolve these differences and get this moving.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Supervisor Rivas. I remember that we walked out of a meeting where all the 3 agencies were there, the school, the city, and the county, and we had an agreement of how we were going to move forward. Were some people not paying attention? I don't know. But you're right. We've done everything at this end to address the problem, and it just hasn't gotten there yet. So, Supervisor Patella.
Yeah, Supervisor Rivas is correct in recounting the chain of events. And I participated in that meeting, and we walked out of there with an agreement with the city, with the school district, and the county, and we approved it. And the school did as well. We had a timeline. We agreed to build that road, and the design for the closure system. And this is just strictly, I think, sour grapes on a couple of council members for one particular reason or another. I don't think they have any factual basis to disrupt what we've already agreed to. I don't see what could be changed, other than they move forward in the safety in mind for those young people attending that campus. So I agree with Supervisor Rivas. I think the city manager, should be agendized to explain where the city is on this. How do we make this work? Because I'm at a loss. I went to that meeting along with Supervisor, the chair, and we had it done. So I'm all for moving forward with this project as quickly as possible. It should have been done already.
Yeah. And Sarah, thank you. I know that you have attended all the meetings. The high school had a meeting, you were there, and so were you, Joe. I was there, and then they had another meeting. I know we were represented there. So I really don't know what the holdup is, but thank you for your efforts to educate where we're at.
No problem. And I would like to say that an unfortunate part of this has been timing, and I hope that this ER being released, hopefully this summer, will show our commitment and provide a little more detail and put some more facts in front of them. And I don't know if I'll for Joe to speak if he has any comment about it. But thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Supervisor De La Cruz.
When I read the article, I say, wait a minute, are they talking about the same Board of Supervisors here? Because I remember we committed and we worked and there was compromise that was made. And what I like to see is what all three agencies committed. What did they commit? Bring it, what they say they were going to bring to the table. I like to see in writing what San Benito High, City Hall, and what the county, we agreed to commit, because I thought this was a done deal.
We thought so too.
So I'd like to see that, Sarah. If we're going to bring it back to this board for discussion, bring a matrix or some type of format that every organization was agreed to bring to the table. Got it?
Can do. I understand that is what we've brought in them, and that is already what has been denied, but we'll bring it back again.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, very good. Sarah, thank you again. Oh, Supervisor
No,
Hunter?
I want to go back to the previous one.
Oh, okay, we're good.
You move forward before I could compare dates, because I was the one that was concerned about the dates. And Jim, I don't see any difference in the dates in this handout than what was on the AIT, or yeah, whichever way those initials go. I'm sorry if I'm missing something. You still, on the handout, you still have a release date of June 5th, a submission deadline of June 19th, and a Board of Supervisor action of July 7th.
The submission deadline is June the 19th on page 2.
June the 19th, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And the Board of Supervisors action is expected to be July the 7th on page 2. On page 4.
Well, okay, are we having a meeting on July 7th? I thought we were only having one meeting in July.
We're having a meeting, it's not July 7th, it's going to be July I believe the 21st. All right. Yes. Okay. So that should probably say July the 21st. If the board would like us to take this back and get it cleaned up and present a clean version to you, I'm happy to do that.
And it doesn't affect your timeline?
It's going to have to be what it is.
Okay, because we can do it now, if we can just agree that the
Okay.
date is not July 7th.
So
this
it
way
should
won't
be
hold up.
June the 19th and July the 7th on page 2.
Or would the proper thing, just go ahead and pull the item and discuss it?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's just do that.
Why-
Yeah, that's fine.
Why
Okay.
why don't we do that instead of?
Yeah, then we
That'd be
can vote
fine.
on it with
Okay.
the changes.
Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you, Jim. And that's item number 9. Okay, CAO Espinosa, anything
Yeah.
else for
Yeah,
department heads?
one more item. The board requested staff, myself, to work with our local cities, City of Hollister and City of San Juan Bautista, on getting a meeting scheduled. We were able to do that. So we have a scheduled meeting tomorrow at 5 o'clock per the board's request. So I just wanted to make sure and remind the board as well as the public that that's going to be happening tomorrow at 5 p.m. here in this
The City of San
chambers.
Juan, the City of Hollister, and the County
of
Board of
San Benito.
Supervisors will all be here in
Yeah.
the chambers for the meeting tomorrow at 5.
That's correct.
Okay?
All right.
And this is the only item on the agenda is to discuss the sales tax or options for, and possibly vote on how we're going to proceed.
That's correct, Madam
Okay.
Chair.
Very good.
And that's it. Those are all the announcements.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. All right, we'll move on to the board announcements. Supervisor De La Cruz?
Yes, Madam Chair, just more for the public and the board and Ray, I won't, if we do have a meeting on July 7th, I won't be attending that meeting. I'll be out of town. I know that there's been some disagreement between the city council and the board of supervisors, but, you know, I think we can still hash out our differences. One good thing that I know will benefit the community is what our mayor's trying to do in terms of the tiny homes. I think we really need to support him and be behind him on this idea. It's a wonderful idea. It's a good benefit to our community, and we can have a lot of homeless members, even families can really benefit from this concept. That's all, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Patel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy that Supervisor De La Cruz brought that issue up because I was, talk about this as well. I received an email from a business constituent in my district that has property on San Juan Road, and they expressed concerns about 7 months ago and have written various agencies and departments in our county, and really we haven't been able to address some of their concerns. I'm almost certain that if it's not only them that are being affected, but others as well with adjacent properties along that area. And, their concern is, the illegal dumping as well as what people do every day and its effects on the environment. And part of their use permit, which I think Byron got a copy of this email as well, was that, they had to put limited fencing due to habitat concerns and wildlife be able to move through the area. But also the side effect, now that we have the encampment in the San Benito River, is that there's trespassing and issues with businesses down there as well. And they went as far as posting a guard down there, but it's very difficult. It's a tough situation, and I know we're working on it. The Health and Human Services is working on it. The committee's working on it. I think there was discussion that maybe some dumpsters could be placed down there, some portable restrooms, which we've talked about it in the past. And I would encourage the committee, the city of Hollister, to not only for the time being temporarily find a way to put some restrooms and some dumpsters, and hopefully these folks that are down there in the river understand that we're trying to work with them and that they have to somewhat police themselves as far as maintaining that area. But I'm not as worried about the tiny home aspect right now. I'm worried about getting the center up and running and seeing how it's going to operate. And who's going to operate it, and whether if it's, the discussion has to come back to this board, whether it's an outside agency that's do it or organization, or we're depend on something that's a little bit closer to home. I think we have to have that discussion here, not elsewhere. And then the other issue is that where the homeless camp is right now, is the city limits of Hollister. And what they, probably should be addressing right now is the rules of people being down there. Right now, it's just, they think they're out of sight, out of mind, and they're not. And I would suggest, whether it's at the committee level, the city of Hollister, somebody establish some framework as far as a boundary where we're going to allow this to take place. And if anything goes on outside that boundary, then there should be some sort of enforcement action taken. That's a suggestion I have to maybe address some of the concerns of these legitimate, property owners and the safety of their employees. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Botello. Supervisor Munzer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no announcement. I just want to verify, at one of our previous meetings, I asked that the homeless center be agendized, and I believe it's scheduled to be agendized for July 21st. I just want to make sure we're still on track for that.
We are.
We are.
We are.
We are.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, and I can assure you that Jim is working on that presentation as we speak. He's-
And maybe that would be a good time to invite the mayor, because he's been talking about these tiny homes in committees. He's been talking about them in the media. Maybe it'd be a good time for the mayor to come and explain his concept of tiny homes and where he plans on doing that at that same meeting.
Yeah, but I think what we need to do is have what the county is doing and have that presentation first from
Okay,
our,
all right.
from our county, our agency that is working with the partnership of the city and others. So I think that's probably what we need to do first, so. Okay, Supervisor Rivas.
Right. So I was going to stay mum on this as well, but until we had some advocacy for tiny homes. I'm not an advocate for tiny homes. I think that the tiny home concept could be a solution, but it's not the solution to solve homelessness in San Benito County. I think that if you have, a large city, or if you're maybe Sacramento, it could be part of the solution there. But in my opinion, I don't think it works right now for San Benito County. And the reason is because, the vision in this community for over a decade now has been a center and has been a shelter. And we're almost there. I mean, we are very close to accomplishing this. But, in my opinion, I think to take a step further, the homeless in San Benito County, in addition to having a center, what they need is resources. We need to focus our efforts in our few dollars that we have in improving our Health and Human Services Agency, in improving our Behavioral Health Agency to provide adequate resources to this very needy, this very vulnerable population. And I think that this tiny homes is a distraction. I think if the mayor wants to pursue this, that's great. I think that's a great objective for him. It's a great goal for him. But as far as this stuff with he meeting with the county, I just think it's unacceptable, because I think until we establish as a board a policy to adopt these tiny homes, I don't want to have anything to do with it at all. I just think that, I look forward to the agenda item in the future, but I think that we're on the right path that we currently are on. I think that, we really have to do our best to, improve our resources that we offer through our county to our homeless population. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other announcements besides that?
That's it. I'm off. I'm done.
Wanted to give you the opportunity. But,
Madam Chair,
yes,
can I-
go ahead.
I just want to respond a little bit and be positive about this. A while back, thank you, Madam Chair, first of all. A while back, Supervisor Botello and I, we discussed about the homelessness out on the river, and we both agreed that something needed to be done, otherwise we will end up today the way we are today. And he's correct, and I remember discussing, and we both put good effort into it. I talked to the Sheriff's Department, to Hollister Police, and we just didn't get any results. And I hope, in fact, I even got concerns, citizens in my district complaining about the camp being the way it is today. And in no way do I want to shy away or say that we should stop a center. I think that's the most important thing today for the county, is continue with creating a center for our homeless family. At the same time, if anybody has ideas on how to address homelessness, we should not shy away from them. We should continue to support. It doesn't matter if it's a board collecting together or as an individual member of the community, but any idea that can benefit and address homelessness should be discussed and addressed. But again, I'll restate it that the county's mission today, and we're going to define that down the road, is how do we continue to provide more services with the limited amount of dollars we have, and it's apparently the center is probably the best interest in our community.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Madam Chair.
Supervisor De La Cruz. And now my turn. I just want to say that we are working as a county to really address the issue. And these little homes or tiny homes are just a part. It's just there's so many facets to addressing homeless, and the services that Supervisor Rivas talked about is absolutely correct. We have to start there. And then, like I said, there's steps and other facets to addressing it. So I did visit the river. I did go down there and visit it along with the mayor, and discovered that people do want to better their lives. And I have said this before, the issue of the debris is a huge issue. But I can tell you that most of that garbage has been there for a long time. It is that one of the issues that I see is the access road that goes down there. It's very easy for folks to go down there in the middle of the night, dump their garbage, get out unseen. And so maybe putting a gate there may help. So there are ideas that are being thrown around. So it's not being ignored, and we are going to address it in the very near future and continue to move forward on that. I want to, as part of my announcements, I want to thank Supervisor Munzer. He and I attended a meeting with Congressman Farr in regards to the Panoche Valley Solar, and we met with several other representatives that were there, representatives for Senator Feinstein, and some of these folks were there by phone, Congressman Doolittle, Senator Canella, Assemblyman Alejo, and many others. And this was to address the current status of the federal entitlements for the Panoche Valley Solar, and a schedule for moving forward with the U.S. Corps of Engineers and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Very productive meeting, and I think we are making some ground, and we're going to hopefully have this project approved shortly. I also want to thank Armand from our Public Works. He attended on my behalf and on behalf of the county a neighborhood meeting in my district, and this is a meeting that was called for, Armand is here, that was called by the residents with their concerns on traffic issues. So I was informed that he did a great job of informing them what we can and cannot do. So thank you, Armand, for that. And the last thing is that I did attend by phone the CSAC Legislative Conference, and this was very informative. All of you have already received the Governor's May revision. So really, it was just a recap to let us know what is going on. I want to announce, and hopefully you've all heard this, that the economy is better than the projected numbers that they had come out with in February of this year. We have our state unemployment has dropped to 6.3%, which is wonderful news. The revenue is up $6.7 billion. And a lot of that money is going to go to schools for Proposition 98, which the state had promised that they would do. That we have established the Rainy Day Fund, and they are paying off debts to the counties for pre-2004 mandates. And they're planning for the next recession. They know that it's coming. We will suffer a recession again, and this time we will be better prepared. They do have funds through AB 109, funds for one-time upgrades, and I know that at our CCP meetings, we have discussed these funds. They're to support counties in how we deem, that they should be spent, which it gives us some flexibility. And CSEC's take on the Governor's May revision is felt that everything was good except that which pre-2004 mandates will they be reimbursing? So that is the question that they have. They think counties should know that as soon as possible and how much we will be getting. And the other issue is that transportation is ignoring local needs. We all know that. That's hence our meeting tomorrow night. So it's still and will continue to be a major issue for counties and the state. So I believe that's it for me on my, oh, one more thing, I'm sorry. I sit on the Foster Youth Council, and as well as Jim, and I don't know if there are others here that sit on that. But the county is looking to implement what is called full wraparound services to address, to make sure that these families, the children, the families, and the parents have services to be able to move forward. And our dollars are right now, many of our dollars are going to other counties because they have those wraparound services. So we're making a real great effort to make sure that San Benito County will be able to offer those services, and those children will not have to go to other counties. They can stay here in San Benito, and they can be provided the services that they need. So we're working diligently on it, and that is one of the reasons why we don't have a lot of interest in foster homes here in San Benito County, but with those services, we hope that we can attract more families to open their homes to foster children. So, thank you. All right, the next thing on our agenda are the consent items, and Supervisor Munzer has asked to pull item number 11, and we're pulling item number 9. Any others that are being pulled?
13.
13 from Supervisor Botello. Any others from the board? Any from the public that would like to pull any consent items? Okay, we have pulled item 9, 11, and 13, so I will entertain a motion to approve the remaining.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. So item number 9. And I will not supervisor, I'm sorry, CAO Espinosa, if you could.
Yeah, this item we were just talking about, and there was a discrepancy on date. So we have Jim Riding Sword here to discuss this particular item with the Home Program Income Affordable Housing Project. There are dates that were in discrepancy. I did confirm Supervisor Munzer on the actual date. Our board meeting in July is July 21st, so that's the date. So there's no meeting on the 7th, so Supervisor De La Cruz doesn't have to worry about that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Hey. Jim?
Jim?
Actually, right now, because of the date change of July 7th to 21st, that's not something I don't think that my staff went through and checked all these dates, for that particular date. So it might be best just to, put this off to the next time so that we can make sure that that's all correct. I can tell you what they handed to me. And if that is sufficient, then you could move forward today. But the thing is that if this document says July 7th anyplace else, it's going to have to be changed to July 21st.
Right.
Okay? But on page 2, the proposal submission deadline should say July 19th, 2015 at 5 p.m. And the Board of Supervisors action should say July 21st, 2015 on
Madam
page
Chair?
4. Pardon?
Jim, on agenda page 155, and then the page 8 of the actual proposal, you have their proposal submittal, a submittal proposal in electronic format, PDF, only to Enrique Arroyo, blah, blah, blah. Hard copies are neither required nor desired. The electronic RFP must be received no later than 5 p.m. on July 7th.
And on page...
And on your list, it says the proposal submission deadline, July 19th. I really feel you have conflicting dates within the document of this.
And so I would recommend to the board that we pull this item, take it back to staff, get it corrected, and bring it back to you next time.
Okay, and that would be our meeting of the 16th. So,
Yes.
Okay, is that okay with the board? All right, we will do that, Jim. So
Okay.
then we'll just,
You need a motion to continue?
yes, please.
I'll move that we continue this item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So
Thank
this
you.
item number 9 will come back on
Okay.
the 16th of June. Thank you, Jim. Okay, item number 11, Supervisor Munzer.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted, I did not get a chance to talk to Byron yesterday, but I just wanted to go over that this is the best way to handle this issue of mine inspections as by having a outside consultant do this contract as opposed to doing it in-house.
The level of expertise that is required today for the mine inspections is something that county staff is not able to carry out. And so it's necessary, it's gotten more and more complicated every year, the paperwork that needs to be filed with the state, and now they require a geologist out there on site as well, which is something that they did not used to require. So it isn't something that staff is able to do on their own anymore anyway.
I'm sorry, a geologist needs to be on site?
They're requiring geologists to go out there and inspect the sites now, which is not something that.
Not every day, just go
No,
out
yeah,
there.
but for the annual inspections.
Gotcha, okay. Yeah, I just have a constituent that is concerned about this, and so I just wanted to make sure that it was for the record that, one, the county did not have the resources to fulfill the state requirements, and this was the cheapest, best way to do that.
Yeah, and I would point out that they are not raising, it in spite of the fact that it has gotten more complicated, they have not raised their fees that they are passing on to the operators as well. So they're being consistent.
Supervisor Patello?
No, I was just going to say thank you. I was just saying thank you.
All right, Supervisor Patello, you had a question?
Yeah, well, or comment, my knowledge of Samara, and I think Byron is correct as far as, we have to contract this service out and have somebody from the outside do this work to satisfy, the requirements, not only from the individual mines and quarries, but also for the county. Otherwise, the state comes in and tries to take it over, and I think that would be a worst case scenario than what we have. The only question I have when I saw this, reading this yesterday or over the weekend, was are there other firms out there that we should be maybe going out to an RFP? We've had this consultant for quite some time. If we should be thinking about maybe next go around doing an RFP, just kind of keep everybody on a even keel, or is this, it's so specialized that
It's my understanding that there's more than one firm out there that does this. Staff hasn't had any issue with this one. This is a 3-year, we're extending this contract for 3 years, and they've got another month left on it. And currently, we have contracted with them as well on behalf of operators amending their plans. So that was one of the reasons why we wanted to get this contract done, because we have several additional contracts with individual operators that this firm is working on. So, but we can keep that in mind on the next go-around if it's the wish of the board.
Yeah, and so Mr. Brown still has a great working relationship up there at the Bureau of Mines and Reclamation in Sacramento and with us and the quarries, I assume.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, any questions or comments from the public? Okay, bring it back to the board for a decision.
I would move per staff recommendation.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item number 13, Supervisor Botello.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't necessarily have a problem with these contracts being, there's more than one. I think there's might have been 2, but I pulled 13 just for the heck of it. And there's no additional costs. I read that. But, I just wonder, we enter into these type of contracts with no work being done for a number of years. Should we be kind of entering into some of this at a later date when we are certain that we're going to begin the construction project? Because what I think possibly happens is that even though on the surface there's no cost, but the rates of the principal is charging by the hour will eat up the contingencies. In the next amendment, they're going to get us, just because of the time that has eclipsed.
You're correct. I know our consultant been aggressively working on this, on the environmental issues right now that we're dealing with. And until right now, we are kind of in a juncture of getting the sequel out to find out really if the approach that the consultant has used, mitigating the environmental issues, is viable. With that said, there may be additional costs coming later, requests for amendment of contract, because at this point we don't know really what the regulatory agency gonna comment on the approach that we have dealing with the river and endangered species and different aspects of environmental issues.
And I assume if these additional costs will be still covered by the federal funds.
True. That is correct.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, items from, comments or questions from the public? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board. Thank you, Armand.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda item.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve consent item number 13. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to the regular agenda part of our meeting. And CAO Espinosa, item 21.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this morning we have our Ag Commissioner here, Karen Overstreet. She's new with us. And the particular topic today is accepting a preliminary engineer's report for the mosquito abatement program and adopt resolution of intent to levy assessment for fiscal years 15-16 and scheduled public hearing for July 21st, 2015. So we have Karen here to discuss this with your board.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board,
Good
members
morning.
of the audience. One of my responsibilities as your agricultural commissioner is to administer and implement the mosquito abatement program. Each year we come before the board to present the annual engineer's report and determine the assessment rate. With me today is Mr. Kyle Tankard of SCI Consulting Group. He prepared the engineer's report and also will be available for any questions you may have regarding the report. In fiscal year 2014-2015, there was no increase in the assessment rate. We were able to maintain the program at the 2013-2014 rate at $10.90 per single-family equivalent. For 2015-16, I am proposing an increase in the assessment rate. The maximum allowable assessment for 2015-16, based on the cumulative Consumer Price Index, is $11.74. I'm proposing the rate be increased from $10.90 to $11.22, as recommended by the engineer's report, which is still less than the maximum allowed. I feel that this increase is necessary to maintain the current level of service. I am seeking 3 actions from the board today. I'm requesting that you preliminarily accept the annual engineer's report, adopt the resolution of intent to levy the assessment, and to schedule a public hearing for July 21st, 2015 to hear public comment on the matter. If you have any questions.
All right, we do have, are there any questions? Okay. Any comments from the public on this item? Okay, bring it back to the board.
No, we can't have this report without Marvin.
Oh, we can't, okay. Oh, you did, okay, let's see.
I have item 22. 21. Oh, you listed 22, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's all right, come on up, Marvin. Yeah, but it's okay, come on up.
It's Agenda 22, Marvin.
Good job, Supervisor De La Cruz.
Take that to the bank.
Fair enough, fair enough. Say, we didn't have a raise last year?
Oh, you need to address the
Oh,
board
then
topic.
my criticism is
Yeah, you need to address.
second mistake.
Okay.
You could raise it 3% a year as long as San Francisco CPI's Consumer Price Index is 3% or more. If you have excess CPI increases, you can bank them for the future when CPI is less. It was 2 years ago. I thought it was last year. It was 2 years ago when you used everything in the bank. You exceeded the 3%, but you got by with it. And I was checking the CPI index for the last year for San Francisco, and it was only 2.5% increase. Since you didn't have a raise last year, you're going to have a little bit in the bank. So my criticism is unfounded. I have just wasted a few minutes of your time, so I apologize.
We forgive you.
All right.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board. Supervisor Patella?
I have a question for Commissioner Overstreet. What is your philosophy as far as what is kind of a sustainable reserve in this account? Because, you know, hopefully nothing happens out there that we have some sort of infestation. But is that something that you feel that's kind of somewhat adequate as we do with this increase, and that we have enough in reserve in case you have to really treat an area that has issues?
You know, I think with the program being in place now since 2007, that we do quite a lot of preventative work, more so than just treatment and say, spraying. We work hard at treating storm drains. We have a schedule in which we treat storm drains annually. That's over 2,500 of them now that we do through the month of May. We treat the cemeteries monthly. We answer all consumer complaints, but what we work hard at is determining and identifying the source of the mosquitoes in order to suppress the populations and control them that way. So, you know, I think we have a lot of our expertise in place that we're able to control the program now, and so therefore some of the costs are lower, but we need that reserve there, yes, to be able to respond.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, Supervisor De La Cruz?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I actually was trying to get to that section, maybe you can answer my question. How's the swimming pools in the residents, knowing that there's less foreclosures, there's less people being evicted? Is that activity kind of dropping?
Yes, you know, it has improved. I did look through some stats, you know, we kind of base our stats on a calendar year because of it's a complete cycle. But in 2013, the agency treated 28 pools in which we had to treat them twice a year, or what we call our green pools, and owners cleaned and drained 42 pools. For 2014, the agency treated 22 pools. So that has dropped. I think the housing comeback and that, and maybe a lot to do with our public outreach, has helped that situation a lot.
Okay,
Very
thank
good.
you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, all right. Any a decision here?
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2015-44.
Okay, there's a motion.
And Madam Chair, make a motion also accept to schedule a public hearing for
Yes.
July 21st.
Oh, yes, I'll incorporate that in my motion.
And I'll second the motion.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 22, CAO Espinosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, item number 22, we're actually going to move to the end of the agenda. During our board retreat and multiple meetings that we've had with our special budget meetings, we've stated that we would have it in the afternoon. So we've actually calendared that for the afternoon, made a supplemental change on Friday. Just want to make sure the board's aware of that.
Okay, so we're moving item 22 after item number 27. So it'll be the last item of the day.
Yeah.
Okay?
Item number 23 on our agenda has to do with the board adopting a resolution for a mandatory organic waste recycling program for the county. In essence, really, it's AB 1826. So on February 10th, 2015, your board actually received a presentation at the board retreat from a Mary Pitto. She was actually our regulatory affairs advocate for RC, excuse me. And in that presentation, she highlighted Assembly Bill 1826, and that particular bill was signed in 2014, requiring businesses generating organic waste in counties to arrange for recycling, and this would start in April of 2016. This poses really a high cost for some of the smaller counties, a burden on them, especially those that generate very little organic waste or greenhouse emissions. And they actually did a study and they calculated this. It's about 1.4% of the state emissions for small counties. AB 1826 also defines 19 counties that are rural with less than 70,000 residents actually qualify to be exempt from this process, and our county happens to fall in that category. So currently, we're really not sound economically. Obviously don't have the facility in place and to be able to handle such an operation. And there's also another factor here is having to report to the state. So there's a lot of work there that needs to go into this program, which we're really not ready for. Today, what we're requesting of your board is to actually move forward with signing a resolution opting to affirm an exemption from the requirements of the mandatory commercial organics recycling. That's the one item. But I just want to make sure the board's aware that this particular item is something we can still work on. We can address before 2020, and I think it's something that we need to address. But as of now, this is a really good thing for our county since we are small and don't have all the resources that some of the larger counties do have. So I just wanted to bring that to the board. This is something that we need to get in and get signed off if we go this direction, and it has to be done before the end of the month. So that's the reason why we're here today.
And I believe this was the item that Supervisor Botello brought after the RCRC meeting.
Yes.
And so I'm glad we have it on the agenda. So,
Yeah.
okay, any comments from the board on that?
Madam Chair?
Yeah, I think the summary that the CAO gave us was perfect. This is time sensitive, though. I think we need to do this at this meeting. We had it on our agenda at an earlier date, and we needed to kind of explore some other potential uses for this green waste and really it didn't work out, and so that's why it's back before us again.
All right. Supervisor De La Cruz?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Supervisor Patello, or maybe Ray, if we prolong, if we take the exemption route, and if there's a deadline that we need to meet per AB 1826, when we do decide to get in, is that an increased burden on the local businesses, or does the clock starts for us once we get in, or is it just delaying that once we do get in, it becomes a huge burden on a lot of the local businesses?
Honestly, I don't think it would be any different with the businesses implementing. It just gives them more time right now. I think they'll be informed as far as the state requirements of waste diversion and what could go into the landfill. But I think that's it's a give our contractors a little bit more time to implement a program, as well as the businesses. So this is really a benefit. And the cost effectiveness is not the same for a small county as it is for a large county that has, that economy of scale. So this is something that was developed by the state to allow us a little bit more, time and leeway, keeping in mind that it's a benefit to smaller counties.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions at this time? Any questions or comments from the public? Okay, I'll bring it back for a decision.
I'll make a motion to approve, let's see, that, I guess, let me turn to the motion here.
Okay.
Oh, I don't have a number on the.
It's page 411.
What is it?
411 on our agenda packet.
Okay, 411. I'm at a loss. I'll let you make the motion, Jerry.
I'll go ahead.
Okay.
I was-
I'll adopt resolution, make the motion to adopt resolution number 2015 dash,
That's what I was looking.
do I have a dash number? Do we have a dash number?
45, it would have to be 45, huh?
I believe it's 45.
Okay, 45, adopting an exemption from the requirement of implementing a mandatory organic waste recycling program in San Benito County and authorizing the chair to sign.
I'll second it.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item number 24, CAO Espinosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, item number 24 on our agenda. This is something that your board has actually heard in the past. During our special board meeting in April, you received a presentation from our Auditor Controller, Joe Paul Gonzalez, concerning OPEB, our ARC, as well as teeter funds for our budget. During that presentation, there was new light that was brought upon the office of the auditor's office with regards to our obligations with CalPERS and which strategy or which scenario we needed to go, and requested to actually bring this back to your board at a later date. So today, here we are to talk a little bit more about the CalPERS OPEB funding and what strategy your board should go with. Our auditor controller is actually requesting your board to move forward with supporting strategy 3, which is at 6.12%, during his presentation. If I may, Madam Chair, reserve the right to give comments after with regards to administration and what our recommendation would be after, following the presentation.
All right.
Joe Paul Gonzalez.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Board of Supervisors. So as CAO Espinosa mentioned, this is really a kind of a follow-up of a previous meeting where I brought the subject up of pertaining to the certification of our funding policy related to our OPEB trust held with CalPERS. They call it, and I never know how to pronounce it, CERBERT or CERBERT. The acronym just doesn't, it doesn't bode well for pronunciation. But the CalPERS likes to keep that acronym because it really, identifies exactly what it's for. So the CalPERS OPEB trust, the administration of those trusts, CERBERT, requires the governing board of all public agencies that have funds on deposit with them to certify an OPEB funding policy. The policy consists of 4 sections. There's a copy in your agenda packet of these sections. Section 1 is the asset allocation strategy. Section 2 is the ARC funding, portion of that strategy. And Section 3 is the contribution method of the ARC as part of the funding policy. And Section 4 is the coverage years of which the actuarial valuation is effective. The focus of this presentation relates mostly to Section 1 of the OPEB funding policy. Because historically, like Section 2, we've always contributed 100% of the ARC. That's been the de facto board policy. Even though we've had years where we couldn't pay for the entire ARC for the general fund, we found strategies of which to make up the difference, at least, timing strategies. And so we've always been able to make the 100% of the ARC. Section 3 is the way, the method in which we pay the ARC. We pay the ARC payment net of PAYGO costs. PAYGO costs are the retiree costs. So we pay those to CalPERS, and whatever the ARC payment is, subtract the PAYGO costs, and that's really the ARC payment that we make to CalPERS. And Section 4, the most current actuarial valuation that we have is the one dated for July 1st, 2013. And each valuation is good for 2 years. That valuation was good for 14-15, which is the current fiscal year. Excuse me, and next fiscal year, 15-16. In 2013, when the board decided to go with strategy 1, the long-term expected rate of return was 7.61. And you could see there the other rates for the other two strategies. 7.61 is the least conservative strategy of the 3 strategies offered by CalPERS. The asset allocation strategy is really based upon the board's willingness to assume risk.
Yes, we have a question.
Joe Paul?
Yes.
So in 2013, we set the strategy number 1, you said?
Yes.
Of 7.61. Did we meet that? Did we meet that rate?
We're going to get to that. We're going to show you how we met that.
Okay, all right.
So it's like any other investment. You know, if you invest in the stock market or invest in bonds or whatever your investment portfolios are, there are some investments that are less risky, lower reward, more risky, there could be higher reward, but they could be, also, losses incurred. So there's more risk associated with, those investments where the payout could be very high. As I mentioned, the latest actuary evaluation was done by Nyhart, and it was dated July 1st, 2013. The board at that time selected strategy 1. At the time that the board made that selection, we were having more difficulty trying to balance the budget than we are having now. So, there was an opportunity to go with a lower discount rate, but it also meant that by choosing a lower discount rate, our ARC payment would have been higher. So the board decided not to do that. And at the time, we chose a 7.61% rate. The long-term expected rate of return offered by the CBERT now has dropped to 7.28%. And as I mentioned, the current valuation is good for this fiscal year and next. If there had been a significant change in in the discount rate that was being used by our actuary, and and we had not met that discount rate by a significant amount. CalPERS could have asked us to do another valuation, an interim evaluation, to ensure that the discount rate was appropriate. But because, CalPERS has decided to lower their expected rates, technically, it didn't require us to pursue an interim valuation. So, because the change wasn't significant.
Madam Chair? if I may?
Yes.
Can you go back to the prior slide? The second bullet, that was a question Supervisor Botello had asked at our last meeting. Which rate are we budgeting for this 15-16 year? And in there, when you look at that, it's actually 7.61. So that's what we actually budgeted for, and that's what CalPERS is allowing us to have for this next budget. So we're okay for this next year. It's going to be the following year that we need to decide which percentage we want to go. So make sure the board's aware of that.
So let me make sure I understand this correctly. For this coming year, we were at 7.61. That's what everybody worked on. And we're making a decision today of a strategy that will affect next year's budget.
I'm going to get to that. It is really a two-part, there's a two-part certification going on that I'm asking the board to do. It's really to reaffirm, certify that old strategy, Strategy 1 to 7.61%, because that certification was not signed by the governing body, and that needed to be done. I was not in the email chain with the CBERT regarding that request. That was my staff, and so it came to me, came to light very recently, and that's the principal motivation of this item before you.
Well, I'm still, but the percentages that and the strategies that we have, it's the whole structure of the budget that we're consider this year is based on a percentage that's a little bit higher, and we would have to make the adjustments before adopting this year's budget.
No.
No, that's not. So what we're going to be, my understanding is from what Joe Paul's saying, it's a two-part approval by your board. So your board is going to approve the 7.61, which we budgeted for this coming year, and the following year. And which is going to be different. It's going to be a different strategy percentage. Either it's going to be a 7.28 or all the way down to the third strategy, which is a 6.12.
Okay.
The slides that I'm about to go to will explain that, I think, clearer. Okay, so here's the 2015 CBERT strategies. 7.28 strategy 1, 6.73 strategy 2, and 6.12 strategy 3. All of them are lower than the current 7.61 strategy. So there are several environmental factors influencing the funding strategy. One is the actual performance of the OPEB fund. Another is kind of the regulatory environment in which all government agencies must comply with. That's the GASB, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board pronouncements that affect currently GASB 43 and GASB 45 are the effective pronouncements concerning OPEB. And Another significant environmental factor is that there are expected significant savings from labor negotiations concerning Medicare healthcare supplemental plans that I'll be explaining here. First, the OPEB trust. The first deposit was made in June, on June 25th of 2009, and that was a $2.3 million deposit. Since then, there have been additional contributions of about $8.9 million. In all those years, the total CBIRT expenses have been about $59,000. Very low cost of administration, excuse me. The investment earnings on those contributions have been over about $5.5 million. So the total assets as of 6/30/2014 were over, well, $16.7 million. But that was before the payment for that fiscal year of the ARC payment that the county made. So this does not include the ARC payment for June 30th, 2014. And so even without that payment, the annualized internal rate of return calculation was 13.35%. So significantly higher than the 6.71%. Here's a kind of a chart showing where after the deposit, you could see in fiscal year 14-15.
You said 6.71, and you meant 7.61, I'm sure.
Oh.
Okay?
Yes, I
Just
did.
want to make sure that we're on the same page.
Okay.
Yes, it did. Senior moment.
Get in there, Joe.
So 14-15, after the deposit was made, we have $18,715,000 in the CBIRT. But you can see from the chart that our contributions in the teal color and the ending assets in the blue, that we have consistently ended up with investment earnings that were positive and greater than our contributions. With regard to the strategies that the CBIRT applies, they have the, CalPERS, the CBIRT, has these three strategies, and they measure against a benchmark that they have selected. You could see that strategy one, which has been employed in this chart for 5 years, you can see that the benchmark was 13.69, and the CBIRT strategy one was actually 13.95, performing a little bit higher than the benchmark. And that pretty much has been consistent throughout the years, even up to the June of 2014. Strategy one has been consistently higher. Strategy two, which has only been around for, this is on the second year now. The benchmark was 6.91, and it's, I'm sorry, 6.98, and the CBIRT actually performed at 6.91. And strategy three, which was the most conservative, the benchmark was 7.21. In that case, the CBIRT actually came in lower than the benchmark at 7.15. Nevertheless, they're very, very good returns on all three strategies. you could see that most of the participants in the Siebert are using strategy 1. A few are using strategy 2, and even less are using strategy 3. But, you know, this is almost $4 billion in assets. So we had a presentation here not long ago concerning GASB 68, which is, that pertains to retirement. That's a pronouncement that creates a new standard for the decoupling of investment earnings from the actual expenses of the retirement. We know that the OPEB has already announced that they are going to implement the same type of pronouncement that they did for retirement for OPEB. And so even for pre-funded OPEB plans, the new standard will require the recognition of long-term obligations for OPEB benefits as a liability for the first time. So we're going to actually see it on our balance sheets. But the new standards will be much like the GASB 68 standard, which is, okay, now you have to use a much more conservative discount rate. They're suggesting that part of the discount rate consists of the municipal bond index rate, which is, in a very low range, a little bit higher than 3% and a little bit higher than 4%. Significantly lower than the discount rate we're using now. So as you could see, let me go to the next slide. I think I explained it better. So this means that for financial reporting purposes, the calculated OPEB liability will be greater than the actuarially accrued liability calculated for ARC purposes. I'm probably losing you right here on this statement. Excuse me. Excuse me. But that's essentially we're going to have two liabilities, one for funding purposes and one for expensing purposes and reporting. So by adopting a more conservative asset allocation strategy with a lower expected long-term rate of return, the county actually will reduce the disparity between the OPEB liabilities for financial reporting and the actually accrued liability in the OPEB valuation report. So instead of the liabilities for financial reporting will be this, this much, and the valuation showing this much, by choosing a lower discount rate for the valuation, it brings their liabilities closer between reporting and, the investment and the valuation report.
So, Paul, go ahead, Supervisor De La Cruz, and then I'll ask my question.
I hope I'm asking the right question. So, Joe, time will allow that gap to meet somewhere, right? There'll be an equilibrium point somewhere in the future, right? 10, 15 years?
Maybe.
That's hard to say.
Wow.
That's hard to say because, but keep in mind that every 2 years, a valuation will be done.
Right.
So as we are increasing our assets, we are reaching a higher level of pre-funding. Our liabilities are being reduced. So as things are getting better, we will, for investment purposes, you know, we're actually going to see less liability because we have more assets. And then, but, you know, the opposite could be true as well. So, but by choosing a more conservative discount rate, the effect of that is lessened.
But isn't the, Madam Chair, isn't the ARC, isn't that a current operating expense is what we incur for that operating year? The ARC?
The ARC payment?
Yeah.
Remember, the ARC payment is really two components. It is the actuarially accrued unfunded liability, and then the normal costs. Normal costs are related to employees working right now.
And that's the current operating cost?
Yeah. You know, the cost of that benefit being charged right now.
Okay.
And that unfunded accrued liability relates to the costs that were not recovered for the retirees and the costs that have not recovered for the actives in prior years. Okay, that's the ARC payment.
Okay, got it.
Okay, now, Joe Paul, my question would be this. You said that there's a gap, you know, one for financial reporting and then the accrued liability. Is the financial reporting the funding side of it?
No,
And-
that's the expense side of it.
Okay, so that, I had them backwards. And then the actuarially accrued is the funding side of it?
Yeah, that's the investment vehicle.
Okay, so, the funding side of it is the one, how does that benefit to reduce that gap?
Yeah.
I mean, how does that help the county for moving forward? I mean, I know that we have to put out more money if we go with a more conservative. So how does this reporting benefit us?
Well, when you choose to go with a lower discount rate, your unfunded liabilities are going to increase. So your ARC payment's going to go higher. Okay, the amount that we're going to have to pay. And so as your liabilities increase, it gets closer to the liabilities that we are reporting on the financial statements. It gets closer. If we chose the exact discount rate of the, as the ones that we're going to use for expense purposes, they would be the same. Liabilities would be the same. Of course, that changes every 2 years when, when the actuary actually takes into consideration how much the assets have changed.
All right, well, you clarified it for me,
Okay.
so thank you. Supervisor Munzer, do you have, well, yeah, because I had them backwards, and now I know that it's different than what I had.
So, actually, Madam Chair,
Okay.
I don't want to sound like, but Joe, every 2 years, we're gonna approve through resolution a new rate, right? Every 2 years. Once GASB tells us we have to put it on the books, every 2 years, there will be an adjustment that will be made to the balance sheet on the liability section, right?
Well, actually, we're every year that's really going to change for, CAFR reporting.
So how do you report the expense or the income if you approve a new rate from 1 year to the next on the balance sheet? How do you report that?
Well, remember, when you approve a new rate, it's really for a couple years down the road.
Okay. So you're reporting the income statement then, right, on the expenses side? Because if you lower the rate, that means you have to put more operating money into that account. So instead of putting $1 million at a 7%, in 2 years, we'll put 1.2 million if we're at a 6%.
Yeah, if you have a lower discount rate, the ARC payment is bigger, you're putting more contributions in the CBERT.
Okay.
And so there's, more opportunity for investment earnings.
Okay. So it would not affect the balance sheet then?
It does change the balance sheet, where the liabilities in the balance sheets for disclosure purposes and and the, the performance of the OPEB trust, the liabilities, get closer to those that are, reduce the liabilities for disclosure purposes, because we have more assets now.
And that was my previous question right there. What you answered, that was right there, Madam Chair.
Okay, Supervisor Munzer?
Jesus.
On slide 9, you said historically, we've been. Microphone, please. On slide 9, you said historically, we have been receiving a rate of return of 13.35.
That's the internal rate of return. Yeah. Does
that mean money in hand?
It means when the net present value of the investment that was made falls to zero. It's a calculated return that shows you the effective rate of that investment. So it's a little bit convoluted way of telling you how much you're earning on your investment.
Okay, so, all right, so do you see that rate dropping significantly in the next few years?
If you choose a more conservative discount rate, yes, it will drop. It will go lower.
Okay. So why would we want to choose a lower rate?
Because the market, we saw what happened in 2008. Values in many investment portfolios went down 40%. When you have more money of the portfolio invested in less riskier instruments, the amount of that drop is much less than if it is when you have a riskier.
Oh, okay, so going strategy 1, the money is invested in riskier stuff.
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay. Then the only other question I had, or comment, is our predecessors in the 70s were very conservative on their spending, and that locked us into a 10 cents on the dollar on our property taxes forever. So does sometimes going conservative end up costing you on the long run also?
Well, that had been, your predecessor, that had been all well and good if they had maintained that posture of conservatism. Had they, when they adopted defined benefit plans, done actuarial valuations to look at what the real cost of the benefit was.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying now, but I'm just saying that with the property tax and the discussion we had at the last meeting,
Yes.
they were conservative. They basically said, we only need 10 or 11 cents on the dollar to run the county, and that conservatism has locked us into place for that issue. Can we do, by going too conservative here, can we end up?
Oh, no. I remember, you're only talking less than 2% difference there between, the two strategies. I mean, it's not so significant.
Okay.
That I would say that we're missing out on a lot of earnings. You could see from the previous report, this one here, the earnings rates, if you look at the fiscal year-to-date column, Strategy 1 was earning 18.52%. Strategy 2 was 15.58, and strategy 3 was 12.86. For their most conservative strategy to earn almost 13%, that's pretty significant. That's pretty significant earnings. I don't know where you can get that kind of investment returns without assuming a huge amount of risk.
Supervisor Patello, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a question. We started this, contributions in 2009, midway through that year, and with 2 million, and we made additional contributions of 9 million. We have 16 now, better than 16. My question is that just the interest alone on what in our total assets, earning that type of interest, ought to be offsetting some of our unfunded liability.
Well, you can see the investment earnings was 5.5 million there.
Right. Yeah, and
that's significant. That's equivalent to the 13.35%.
And we haven't really added on to our unfunded liability. We've managed that with our latest contracts.
Actually, we're lowering it. Yes.
Yeah,
We
quite a
reduced
bit
it.
lower.
Yeah.
So, I'm kind of hesitant to go with the most conservative strategy and affect our general fund expenditures because we're contribute more to OPEB. And I kind of agree with where Supervisor De La Cruz was going, is that we got the liability here, but the revenues have to meet at some point in the future. They have to.
Well, the strategy is based on a amortization period of 30 years. So in 30 years, all the employees that are still on the plan, all of the unfunded portion will have been covered, right? It's only the normal cost for some of those employees that are still employed. They're employed right now, and 30 years from now, they're still employed, and they were actually included in this plan. Because remember, new employees are not included in this plan. Brand new ones.
Right, but don't we contribute to whatever their costs are, their actual costs now going forward for retirement and?
For OPEB.
Yeah.
Remember, for OPEB purposes, brand new employees will be receiving the PEMCA minimums.
Right.
Not the guaranteed health care contribution, the fixed cap contribution that the county
So the fire is
is
not
offering.
getting bigger.
No.
No, it's not.
So that's kind of, sometimes, Wayne.
It's not getting bigger, but it also means that we have an opportunity to be a little bit more conservative.
I understand what you're saying. Okay.
Where are we now, Joe Paul? Page?
I was on 13 here.
Okay.
I think you're on the next. Yeah.
Okay, so that was the first of the environmental factors that I brought forward. This is this. Wait a minute. No, that was the second, the OPEB, the GASB 68 equivalent that's going to be coming down the road. That's the regulatory environment that all governments have to comply with. So we know that that's coming down the pike. The third environmental factor is the fact that Medicare health care supplemental plans are being negotiated at this time. We've already achieved this negotiated, this goal of attaining a Medicare healthcare supplement plan cap, which is based upon the capped that are employed right now with non-Medicare plans. We've already achieved that with, I believe, a couple of bargaining groups, small ones. But the more significant savings are expected to be achieved in the remaining larger groups by, hopefully by calendar year end. To the tune of close to $1 million. Those savings are expected. So you can see that the 14-15, your CAO asked that a post-contribution change scenario be conducted by the actuary. And if you look at 14-15, you see that our ARC payment's $1.8 million. With that change, just in the Medicare supplement rate plan, if that concession is gained, the ARC payment is going to drop to $845,000. So that's, well, $941,000 in expected savings based upon that change in fiscal year 14-15, using those assumptions.
Madam Chair, if I may?
Yes.
In addition to that, the unfunded liabilities or the liabilities will also drop to about $21 million. So significantly reducing that. Now, I did have a question for Joe Paul on page 10, I believe, in your presentation, your PowerPoint. Yeah, that right there.
Yes.
That shows that we're currently at $18 million of that, those unfunded liabilities, correct? Or that's what we actually have funded?
No, that's the plan assets.
Okay. So what do we have funded right now as of today?
What is the percentage funding of the plan?
Right.
I don't know. I'd have to, that's something that would have to be calculated by the actuary, based upon these, the performance of the trust and the current discount rate.
Well, one of the things that I was going to highlight is that we're tightening that gap, and we're making progress into what's being funded to what we owe, basically, simply put. And I do have a few comments after. I'll reserve them.
Okay.
I'm itching to talk, but I'll wait till the presentation's done.
Very good.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Ray.
Supervisor Delacruz?
Thank you. I mean, the last number I heard was somewhere like 49, 52 million. That's the last I heard. And you just said that we could, by moving on this change, we're looking at $21 million reduction of that, and then we must have, what, 15, 20 right now? So
Yeah.
are we getting close to that number?
Yeah, and I think the last figure we had was 14 and change. I'm not sure what's been over the last year or thereabouts, what's been added, but we're probably about the $15 million mark. I believe about 3 years ago, when I started here in this office in administration, we were getting close to the $40 million range. It was pushing in the mid-30s to upper 30s, if I recall. And we reduced that with our last negotiations to, I believe about $29 million, and then this actuary that Joe Paul Gonzalez was talking about, the pre-evaluation here, actually shows about $21 million. Obviously, some of these figures are, there's some nuances to the calculations, the 7.61% and a few other things. So, but they're probably pretty close to what that is. So yes, to answer your question, yes, we are reducing that gap significantly.
Right. To confirm what the CAO Espinosa just said, so the actuarial evaluation on July 1st, 2013 showed an AAL of almost $30 million, and the assets at that time were $14 million. So it showed a UAAL, unfunded actuarially accrued liability of $15.6 million. With this change regarding the Medicare supplemental health plan rates, the actuary accrued liability is 21.5 million, and the assets again at the time were 14 million. So the unfunded actuarially accrued liability drops to $7.4 million. But that's again using a 7.61 rate. So we're getting closer and closer to having a funded defined benefit plan. So okay, let me go back to where it was. So with, given that this change is so significant that we think that we're going to actually save about $1 million, close to $1 million a year, it really is a very good time to say, you know what, we can afford to adopt a more conservative strategy. Because now we have to protect our assets. The number of retirees is now getting large enough that we need to be a little bit more prudent with our investment vehicle and take on less risk because those obligations are out there. And so, it really puts the board in the position to assure that those benefits are going to be there for, for what the board intended to do, which is to provide health care coverage for retirees. So the board action today, to kind of clear up the, what the action should be, is to certify the OPEB funding policy with asset allocation strategy 1 for the valuation dated July 1st, 2013 for the fiscal years 14-15 and 15-16, and direct the OPEB funding policy for the valuation dated July 1, 2015, selecting asset allocation strategy 1, 2, or 3 applicable for fiscal year 16-17 and 17-18, and to direct the chair to sign the certification. To kind of recap, my recommendation is that we've had excellent performance with the OPEB trust. We know that we're entering a stricter regulatory requirement by the GASB, and the environment is such that we have to disclose the liabilities on our financial statements, and we are expecting significant savings from negotiations, labor negotiations, and those savings, some of those savings, I believe, should be used to choose a more conservative funding policy, or more precisely, an asset allocation strategy. And I'm recommending that the valuation that be for the July 1st, 2015, effective for 16-17 years and 17-18, be strategy 3. And I don't know if there's any other questions.
Do we have any other questions of Joe Call from the board at this time?
Joe, 14, 15, and wait a minute, 15, 16, we're about to approve it. So what you're asking us is to approve a rate for the next year's budget preparation, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or 15, for 16, 16, 17, and 17, 18.
Well, I'm asking you to direct that the OPEB funding policy should be to select asset allocation strategy 3 so that the actuary can use that asset allocation, that discount rate, for the purposes of creating that valuation. And that valuation is effective for 2 years, for the 16-17 year and the 17-18 year.
So it is two-part. That's the Part B.
Yes.
And Part A would be approving the 15-16 of 7.61 that we've actually already approved. We're just certifying it.
Yes.
Correct?
That's right.
Okay. All right, so at this time, let me go ahead and ask the public, or you want to go now?
If
Okay,
that's all right,
sorry.
Madam
No,
Chair.
you absolutely can.
So, I pondered over this. I've actually had a conversation with Joe Paul Gonzalez, and one of my concerns with Strategy 3 is on page 12, or I believe it's page 12 on your, my page numbers are one number off, but I believe it's slide number 12. And in there, I don't see a current evaluation of the proposed asset allocation strategies. In essence, really, kind of what are we buying? What are we getting, and how much, what are the costs associated with that? And in my opinion, it kind of makes it difficult for myself to recommend Strategy 3 with regards to operations and what our side of the house has to do. When you actually look at page 11, I believe it's 11, Joe Paul, if you don't mind. No, it's probably 9, 10 or 9. Go to, yeah, right there, there you go. In that, you'll notice that that strategy that we have on page 9 there was Strategy 1. And when you look at that strategy, we in essence put in contributions approximately 11 million, and with that, we received an investments earnings of about 5.5 million at 13.35% over this life here. And in my opinion, that's not bad. That was Strategy 1. So that was the, in essence, kind of from a earnings perspective and a confidence perspective, you know, was the worst. But in my opinion, I think at this point we have roads we have to deal with. We have deputies that we need to put on the streets. We have accountants that we really need to look at hiring. And there's quite a bit of infrastructure and operational costs that we really need to look at over the next few years. And, you know, from the administrative side of things, I would be looking at a similar strategy, what we've been doing. Fortunate enough, there's 3 strategies here. There's a Strategy 2 as well, kind of an in-between that I think the board can also look at. But for myself, I think I would have to, just in light of knowing the budget and where we're at and that gap, that 5-year plan that we had talked about, we need to do something with that gap. And for me, without knowing the true evaluation of these 3 strategies, it's really hard for me to go with the most go with Strategy 3 when I'm not really sure what that's buying us, so to speak.
And I think I was thinking along the same lines, and the reason I was thinking that is because I know that the negotiations have been tough. We've had to ask for a lot of concessions. And it was presented that we needed to balance our budget. We needed to be able to put money back into the general fund for those reasons, you know, the police, for the staff, you know, we reduced so much in the way of staff, and to provide better services. So by not using that money for those purposes and instead using it for this, which is not a bad thing, Joe Paul, I think you're, you know, doing and acting conservatively does help us in the future, but I think we need to think about the now and how we're still not out of the woods, and we still need to replenish general fund monies to address the services that we need to provide. So,
Yeah,
Supervisor
I
Botello?
agree with you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you bringing these options to us and, you know, letting us make this difficult call, of course. And not only we have to deal with now, but by changing strategies as far as rate of return on these investments, I think there's a difference of about $500,000. And if you go with the history of performance between strategy 1 and 2, and a full million between 1 and 3, if you take the, you know, the percentages of last year, you know, the difference in percentages. But, you know, that would also work against our, you know, funding, you know, if you don't get the rate of return, that money is going into the fund and helping us meet that unfunded liability. But I'm really concerned about having to do it out of the general fund right now rather than the rate of return on investments.
You know, the only thing I was going to mention is that as part of this concession that labor is doing, by adopting a more conservative strategy, much of that concession is really going to pay for their benefit, to guarantee labor's benefit. And that's why it's a little bit different perspective than you know what your CEO is looking at. Hey, he's looking to increase the service levels. You know, a valid goal. But this is, you know, I believe it's prudent to show that we are managing that benefit. We are managing, you know, as the caretakers of that, you know, portfolio, that we are showing labor that, hey, we're doing things in a very conservative way to ensure that, you know, when they retire, it's going to be there for them. And, you know, that's why, you know, that's why I've made this recommendation.
Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah, and I completely agree with our auditor. I think that that's certainly the right course of action, and that's why I'm going to support Strategy 3. I think that, you know, I understand the concerns, and certainly we'd like to improve our services, but, you know, I think this is putting, you know, a foot in the right direction. So.
Okay. Supervisor Munzer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Joe Paul, you said earlier that most of the counties had been going with Strategy 1?
Yes.
Now
Most of the agencies.
Okay, agencies. Now, with this new change and everything, do you have a sense of what most of the agencies are doing? Is it, or is it too soon?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't. It really depends on how mature the employee to, you know, to retiree ratio is. If you have a very young group, you've got time to recover from any major losses, so you can assume more risk. But as the retiree get greater than the employees, you've now dipped into the maturity range, where, you know, we need to be more conservative.
Okay. At this time, I'll open it up to the public then. Marty, you may come up.
You know I'm going to speak on this side.
I do know that.
Joe Paul. Marty Richmond from Hollister. I want to thank Joe Paul for an excellent presentation, and I agree with him 100%. My heart is really beating fast because I am really concerned. Some of the remarks I hear make me believe that some of you don't understand what's going on here. You know, and I hope you're not insulted, but that's absolutely true. You don't understand what's going on. We just came off a great recession, so we got a 13% return. Well, of course we got a 13% return in 5 or 10 years. I mean, the stock market was down to nothing. I mean, the best thing you could have done if you had cash is when it got to the bottom of the barrel, just dump it in there, and you'd have got a huge return. You don't chase returns. The first thing, if you go to your personal investment account and you open it up, the first page of every one of them is going to say exactly the same thing. Previous return is not an indication of future returns. Nobody knows what the returns are going to be in the future. You go for, when the market's low, you go for big returns. You make your investments. When the market's high, you don't go for big returns. Who is expecting the market to go up another 13% from where it is now? Could it happen? Sure, it can happen. But you know, you're betting somebody else's money here. You're betting the taxpayers' money, and you're betting the money that you put aside for the OPEB payments to your employees to cover them. I want to congratulate you. You've done a great job of putting money in the program, and you know I've talked about that, and we've been lucky enough and good enough that we just timing-wise, hey, we hit the bottom of the barrel and we made a 13% return. The idea that you're going to make a 13%, how many of you are planning your retirement on a 13% return in the future? None of you. If you got any brains, okay, I got to tell you something, because you ain't going to get it. In fact, what's going to be your spending plan in retirement? We all know what it's going to be. It's going to be 4% of your net return. So you're going to take all the money you made in accumulation. So this money, to answer Supervisor Munzer's question, is this money in hand? This is not money in hand. Am I correct? This is invested money. So it could go away tomorrow. You can't take this $5 million and say, that's all ours forever. It's sitting in that same account, and tomorrow it may just go poof and disappear. The odds of it disappearing go way down if you go conservative. So if you have a young plan, you have a little to lose, and the market is down, that's the time you go for your higher return. Well, if you have a mature plan, you've paid it off, now you have those assets to protect. You never spend your seed money. That's rule number one. That's the fastest way to go to the poorhouse. Once you're in Nirvana, once you've got your thing paid for, you never risk your seed money. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Marty. Any other comments from the public? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for discussion. Further discussion.
Well, Madam Chair, the recommendation from both the CAO and the auditor was, you know, for this year's budget to reaffirm the discount rate that they, you know, that they worked and built the coming budget with. Is that?
Yes, and you know, I'd like to take those motions separate if we could, just to take
that
away
was
some of the
my
confusion.
suggestion.
If I could, if I could have a motion to certify the the funding for 15-16 at 7.61, correct? Okay.
I'm going to make that motion for strategy 1 for this year's budget.
15-16, okay.
Second.
And there's a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Now, the next item will be, well, the same item, but the second part of it would be to decide on the next 2 years' percentage. And we have 3 strategies before us, strategy 1 being the less conservative and strategy 3 being the more conservative.
Well, Madam Chair, I think the Joe Paul Gonzalez made a very good argument why he's supporting the most conservative strategy, as well as our CAO made a very good argument. I don't know if he was arguing for strategy 1, but as much as maybe something in between. And taking that into account, it may sound like I'm splitting the baby in half, but it's strategy 2 is a full percentage less than what we just approved. And, that's to have a significant impact on, our funding of the budget next year. And hopefully we'll be able to make up ground somewhere. But I'm inclined to support strategy 2, as, it's being a little bit more conservative, unquestionably. And it's closer to strategy 3 that was, the 2013 SERP. I guess that's Norwegian, something like that. But that's what I'm going to support as strategy 2.
Is that your motion, Mr. Supervisor
That's a
Botello?
recommendation that I have.
Okay. And I will have to say that I, too, will support that, and I will second that. And now we can have some discussion. And what I'd like to say to that is that we really don't know what those numbers are. We're taking a risk with our own general fund for the next 2 years. And I would rather, we have to think about the now. And Marty, I know that you're thinking that we're, not taking that into consideration. But in order for us to address the investment that we have to make for future retirees, but at the same time address the general fund issues that we still have, I think that would be, splitting the baby is probably a good thing to do at this time. So that's my take on it. So any other comments?
Madam Chair, I believe that we are being conservative by actually dropping it down. I just don't feel comfortable at this time of cycle to really go down all the way to the 6%. I do understand that we're in a high market, and there's no way we'll probably get another 13% in the next 5 years. I totally agree with that concept, and my compromise will be the middle, Madam Chair.
Okay, so you as well. Supervisor Rivas?
I'm not splitting any babies. I'm going with option or strategy 3. I think that's the best option, and I think that is the most fiscally prudent option. So,
Okay.
thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Supervisor Munzer, any comments? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion carries 4-1. Okay, we can either take a break or finish up regular agenda and then take a break and go into closed session. What is the pleasure of this board?
How long is the next,
5 minutes is what
Okay.
I'm hearing.
Yeah,
Let's
we'll
go
take-
ahead and finish regular agenda, then adjourn to closed session, take our break, and then go to lunch.
can we set the timer for 5 minutes?
Yes, we can.
Timer to hold her to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
1001, 1002.
Thank you, Joe Paul. All right, so the next item on our agenda, Madam Chair, is item 25. This is going to be handled by our Human Resources Director, Georgia Cochran, and this is with regards to implementing Assembly Bill 1522 sick leave law and using the upfront advance method. So we have Georgia here to hopefully highlight this in 5 minutes. No.
We did get that in our packet, Georgia, so we did read that, I'm assuming, I know I did. And so you might want to just highlight some of the points that we will be voting on.
Absolutely, and that was the whole reason for giving you the packet ahead of time, is what we're in the position where we have a new law that needs to be implemented. This is something brand new for the county as well as a number of other employers. And there's some options. There's a whole lot of things that go along with this. But what this law does essentially is expands the qualifying relatives, and that's not just for temporary employees. This big thing is the new sick leave law, giving sick leave to temporary employees, but also expanding the qualified relatives, expanding the way in which the reasons for which sick leave can be used to add in victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, those kinds of things, as well as the minimum increments. And that really plays with our current operating departments. But basically, employees can use sick leave for earn sick leave. Our temporary employees beginning July 1 can earn sick leave for 1 hour in the rate of 1 hour for every 30 hours that they work. That's an option. And that has to be tracked and calculated based on the hours they worked. I've worked with our New World System providers, given them the requirements some time back. They looked at whether or not we could do that, given the current system and its configuration and all of that. They determined that we could not do what this law requires based on their current system, and it was not in programming. I was a little surprised that some of their other longstanding California customers had not given them that. This was the first time they'd seen it. So we asked them to put it into their development because it was certainly a legal requirement for any employer in California. That said, it certainly is not going to be ready July 1st, possibly next July 1st. I really don't know. So we can do a couple of things. We can manually try to track the earnings of employees, of our temporary employees, at the rate of 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. Or we can advance 3 days. Now, why would we want to do that? Wait a minute. Hang on. So there's some posting notices, those kinds of things, which we're already have complied with, as well as we will be sending out. Of course, I can't find my slide. But at any rate, let's just kind of let that go for now. Okay, so we have that option. They earn it as they go, and they can, if that being the case, the board has the ability to set a maximum accrual of six days, 48 hours, and a maximum carryover. Or we can advance 3 days up front to these temporary employees. Those 3 days don't carry over, and we track the usage, but the earnings are up front. So when we realized we could not do this in a systematic approach, at least this year, for now, with our current system, then I made the recommendation that we go ahead and use the upfront method. I've been surveying a lot of public agencies in California and finding out it's a mixed bag. Some are going with the upfront method because of the staff time involved in trying to hand track that. Others who have more sophisticated systems or systems that are able to handle this are going with the accrual method. And the one thing that the law does require is that you put that on their paycheck. So their balances, every paycheck, need to show. So we've been working with payroll on setting up those codes and things. So that's where we are.
It will work on our system.
Well, the accrual does not work in our system,
No,
but we
the 3 day
can.
upfront,
Yes.
and then subtracting whatever's used and showing that on their pay would
Yes.
be the easier. So it requires less staff time and easier to track. So
That's correct. Now, that doesn't preclude, don't know that that would be myself, but someone, human resources, from coming back to you as this is developed and designed in the New World system and delivered as an enhancement to go back to an accrual method. I would say the accrual method is certainly by far the most fair. The reality is it the most cost-effective at this point, given the fact that we have 82 active temporary employees. There are 50 CSWD workers, which are separate. That's not in the county budget. And there are 21 retirees currently active on our payroll. Now, that said, there are still some issues with respect to the retirees. The law says everyone. CalPERS law says you absolutely cannot do this. You cannot give people anything other, retirees, anything other than wages. So we're hoping for some cleanup legislation here before the 1st of July. So we're going to focus on the 82 active employees at this point and maybe run the risk that we're going to get that cleanup legislation.
and if we don't get it?
If we don't get it, we'll backtrack.
We will, okay.
I mean, every CalPERS agency, at least in the state of California, is kind of dancing around that fire because CalPERS law says absolutely not. And there are detriments to a retiree, a retired annuitant working, if we were to do that. So we're kind of damned if we do, damned if we don't. But we do understand from tracking the legislation, working through CSAC, that they expect some cleanup legislation. I just don't know.
And these 3 days up front would be only for temporary?
Yes, because we already give a more generous balance sick leave allowance to our employees, and we'll talk about in closed session what we need to do with that.
Okay, very good. All right, any questions, comments from the public before I bring it back to the board?
Morning, Richmond. My comment has nothing to do with the actual scheduling or accrual. I just want to know if sometime down the road, not now, we can just put a pen to paper and see what the fiscal impact's going to be for us, total fiscal impact for a year. And of course, that would only be an estimate. I understand that, and probably have to leave off the retirees because we don't know what we're going to do. But at least for the 80 temporary employees, we must have some idea based on the records how many hours they work, and assuming they use all their sick leave, because depending on whether they can pay for it or not, people get sick in relationship to whether or not they can get paid for their sick leave to cash it in. When they can cash it in, they never get sick. But if they can't cash it in, they always get sick. So it's a medical phenomenon. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Marty. Anybody else from the public? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for any questions or comments.
I kind of did a rough estimate, about $25,000 to $30,000.
My guess is I suspect that most of the sick leave will get used. I would be hard-pressed to think that it won't. In doing so, they can't carry it over, or if you were to even go on the accrual method and limit what they can carry over, it's going to get used. And what this law has done is put into place some pretty ugly penalties that didn't used to exist for denying sick leave. And so I'm still trying to wrap my head around that as to how to advise our operating departments in what to do.
And it appears that we have, the Assembly Bill 1522, we have to implement that. I mean, that's a law now. Now, we just need to decide if we want to do the upfront.
Yes, that's the question before you today, yes.
Any other?
Madam Chair, I'm dealing with this at my work, and I'll make it real quick, 30 seconds. And I actually have to put a side note on their paycheck and tell them how many hours they have. And what I've learned, because I've gone to some seminars on AB 1522, is that the employee just calls and says, hey, boss, I'm sick. And they have a guaranteed eight hours the next day. That's all they need to do. Simple requirement.
Well, now let me say a little bit of this. There's a whole bunch here with respect to operational issues. This is kind of a modified presentation that the firm has been doing. We've been doing up and down the state to different groups. One of the things is that employees are eligible, they start earning sick leave July 1st. They can't use any sick leave until they have been employed 90 days. So if I was hired July 1st, I couldn't use any for 90 days. But of course, if someone was hired back in January or February as a temporary employee, they're already eligible July 1st. And it is required to be on the books, tracked. There are operational issues. The classic example is the city and county of San Francisco. They've had sick leave for temporary employees for 10 years. So, this law affects them very little. There's a few little changes. And their biggest issue is something that we don't have, is per diem nurses, because they run several hospitals. So if a nurse, a regular nurse who gets sick leave, calls in sick, this is the issue they were facing, the city and county would pay them their sick leave, call in a per diem nurse. Call the per diem nurse, oh, I'm sick today, using my sick leave. Now they've paid sick leave twice, and they're calling again someone else to cover the shift. So they set some policies around that. And we've been talking with Joe Paul with respect to kind of how these procedures will sort of lay out over time and how we put this in. The personnel rules are now actively being revised. I will say that there is active engagement with respect to the revision, and these are things that will come about as a result and where we'll put those policies into place.
Thank you, Georgia. Okay, Supervisor Botello?
Yeah, you know, I read through this, and I was looking for the ag exempt, and I'm still looking for the ag exempt, and
IHSS is exempt.
yeah, and I read it a few times, and I'm shocked that I might have to comply with it. And it's just a typical state law to pay people not to work. Pay people not to work. And then we're get stuck with overtime and everything else, and somebody thoughtless came up with this.
This one has been a little bit frustrating. Sometimes there's a lot of discussion and there's reaching out from legislative aides or whatever with respect to the professional community to get input on operationally how this will work. And for whatever reason, neither the private sector nor the public sector in terms of professional HR community seems to have been consulted. So this is one of those laws, as I'm reading this and others are reading this, it appears that it was written in a vacuum by those who never had a clue as to how it might be implemented. I don't know.
Somebody just wanted to have their name on a bill. That's, happens a lot. So, okay, so what is the pleasure of this?
Madam Chair, I'll move a staff recommendation,
Okay.
which is to implement AB 1522 sick leave law using the upfront and advanced method effective July 1, 2015.
Second, Madam Chair.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We could have council introduce the closed session item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Board of Supervisors will now adjourn into closed session to discuss agenda item number 26 on today's agenda. Agenda item number 26 is a closed session to confer with labor negotiators. The agency designated representatives are Allison Hauk, Ray Espinoza, Joe Paul Gonzalez, Melinda Casillas, and Georgia Cochran. The employee organizations that will be discussed are the Institutions Associations, Law Enforcement Management, Management Employees Group, SEIU Local 521, the General Unit Employees, Deputy Sheriff's Association, and the SEIU United Long-Term Care Workers Local 6434.
Okay, thank you. Anybody from the public comments on this item? Okay, we'll adjourn to closed session, and we will report out after lunch. Thank you. 1:30, yes. We will resume at 1:30. Thank you.
I think you got over 5 minutes.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.